Welcome back to Inspiring Builds. I'm Dan, and today we have a new table saw in the shop, so let's get it set up. If you missed the assembly video, I will link it in the corner. In a perfect world, tools would come out of the box, tuned up and ready to go. But unfortunately, nearly all tools require some tune-up, and at minimum, they need checked to ensure they're set up properly. A tune-up is key for this table saw, or any tool for that matter, to perform as best as possible. Let's do an overview of the saw to get acclimated and then jump right into the setup. Ensure your saw is unplugged first for safety, as your fingers aren't too helpful if they're not attached.
Starting on the front of the saw, there is a power switch, a green button to turn the saw on, and a red paddle to turn the saw off that can be pushed or pressed with your knee if your hands are full, as well as a lock that flips down for a safety feature to prevent the saw from accidentally getting turned on. To the right, you have your blade height adjustment wheel. Clockwise raises the blade, counterclockwise lowers it. You have your blade angle gauge here with a pointer and a lock lever. Simply unlock the lever and change the angle. To check the calibration, lock it with moving the lever to the left, that we will review shortly. It has a knob for the rack and pinion fence system. I just push it back and forth and use the knob for minor adjustments. On the right side, there is a fence lock lever. Towards you is the unlock position to move the fence, and back is to lock the fence in. The blade guard is stored on the right side of the saw. Stored on the bracket is shown, and the riving knife end is stored on the spring-loaded fastener. Ensure it's vertical and then pull it out and turn it 90 degrees to lock it in place. To unlock it, pull it out and turn it back 90 degrees so it's vertical. On the back side of the saw is the other side of the rack and pinion for the fence adjustment. A 2.5-inch metal solid dust port that is built into the housing that encloses the blade. You can use a 2.5-inch adapter or shop vac to hook directly into it. There is a housing cover for the blade that can be removed by these two Phillips screws and two push tabs. This is nice for clean out, checking the arbor, and accessing the riving knife screws. Put the two tabs in the bottom, fasten it back in place, and tighten the Phillips screws. The miter gauge is stored here and just slides into the slots. Up above there is a cable for the riving knife. The saw includes a handy cord wrap located on the left side to store the power cord. The two blade wrenches are stored by the cord. Push in until the button contacts the hole and fastens into place. To unlock, push the button, lift, and pull out the wrenches. Up top is a lever that pulls out and snaps back for the riving knife release. The saw comes on an excellent rolling stand that is stable. It's a pretty heavy saw, but the rolling stand makes it easy to work with. First, ensure the fence rail is locked, then tilt up the stand until the saw is sitting on the kickstand. Unfold the handle side legs, pushing in the levers and folding down until they lock into place. Unfold the wheel side legs by flipping the levers and folding up until they lock into place. To move the saw, place one foot on the axle and one hand on the handle and tilt it towards you. It can easily be moved as shown with a couple of fingers and doesn't take up much space at all. To set it up, again place one foot on the axle and one hand on the handle and tilt it towards you. Position where you want it and unfold all four legs locked in the open position. Pull the stand toward you with one hand on the axle and the other on the handle and tilt over until all 4 feet are on the ground. The fence has two positions. There are levers to lock it into place. The first position uses the yellow tape and can go right up to the blade and can rip up to 24.5 inches. The second position uses the white tape and will start at 8 inches and will rip up to 32.5 inches. It's a pretty thin fence, which makes it easy to clamp something to the top of it. It has a secondary fence that flips up and flips around and has a couple different positions. The first is the higher position and is great if you need to rip a thin piece of stock and use the fence to get underneath the safety guards. The lower position can be used if you pull your fence out from the table and then will sit level with the table. This is nice to support larger material such as a full sheet of plywood. There is also a push stick in a super handy location stored in the fence. I prefer using a couple of push sticks. On the back of the manual has a push stick pattern to make your own. Here is the blade and the riving knife right behind it. To remove the riving knife, pull out the release lever on the left-hand side and the riving knife comes straight out. To put it back in, do the same thing by pulling the lever back out and release it to fasten back in. Pull on it to ensure it's locked into place. The same lever is used for the blade guard that has a built-in riving knife along with the secondary dust collection. Note, do not insert the blade guard assembly and the non-through cutting riving knife into the clamp at the same time. I'm a fan of the cable system as it works great. Ensure the throat plate is adjusted properly. Grab a straight edge. I use a square to ensure the front of the plate is flush or slightly below the tabletop surface and the rear of the throat plate is flush or slightly above the tabletop. This one is high on the front and needs adjusted. It has 4 adjustment points with 2 in the front and 2 in the back that are Phillips head screws. I'm going to adjust the 2 front screws to lower it and check again until the throat plate is adjusted properly. The throat plate is well built and secure compared to other saws with minimal movement. It has a latch that locks into place and can easily be removed by lifting in the opening with your finger. It has a nice metal housing that goes directly to the dust port and a 5/8" arbor that can take a full dado stack. It will require a dado throat plate if installing a dado stack that I will provide a link to in the description below. If not installing a new blade, check that the blade is installed correctly and the arbor nut is tight. One upgrade I'm going to do is changing the blade with a Diablo one. To change the blade, raise the saw blade to its max height by turning the blade height adjustment wheel clockwise. Use the 2 wrenches on the left. Both wrenches are the same, so don't worry which one to use. Put the open end of the wrench on the inside and the closed end of the wrench on the outside. Remove the arbor nut and flange by turning counterclockwise. Place the new blade on the spindle, making sure the teeth of the blade point down at the front of the table. Once the arbor nut is tight, install and lock the throat plate. To test that the blade is square, raise the blade all the way up by rotating the blade height adjustment wheel clockwise until it stops. You want to ensure it's square when the bevel stop cam on the back side of the panel is firmly positioned against the stop, so when the stop hits the cam, it will stop right at 90 degrees, as well as when the pointer is on 0. Confirm with the square, checking for any gaps of daylight. If adjustments are needed, unlock the bevel lock lever by pushing it up and to the right. Loosen the bevel stop screw. Place the square against the tabletop and blade and adjust the bevel angle until it is flat against the square, and then tighten the bevel lock lever by pushing it down. Test again to ensure you have a true 90. Then adjust the stop cam so it's firm against the stop and set the pointer pin to 0, both using a 4mm Allen key. Check that the blade is parallel to the miter slot. I do this with an adjustable square. Loosen it to put it in the miter track. Pick a lucky tooth on the blade. Push the square into the tooth and pull the blade back just enough where the tooth barely contacts the square. Listen to the noise and tighten the square down. After the square is tightened down, double check to ensure the noise stayed the same. Take the same tooth and rotate the blade to the back along with pushing the square to the back of the miter slot and listen for the same sound. This sounds consistent and no adjustment is needed. If it did need adjusted, there are two 5mm bolts that can be loosened on the rear pivot bracket fasteners to adjust the blade parallel to the miter slot and then tighten back down. Check that the riving knife is straight with the blade. Lay a straight edge on the table against the two blade tips and the riving knife should not touch the straight edge. With the blade cover removed, this is the riving knife plate. If an adjustment is needed, simply loosen the larger screws with the 4mm Allen wrench and adjust the three smaller adjustment screws with a 2.5mm Allen wrench, and then tighten the larger screws back down. I find it easier to access the screws from the bottom by removing the housing cover for the blade. Note the instruction manual shows one adjustment screw in the middle on the top, and it's actually in the middle on the bottom. I've always been a big fan of DeWalt's fence. Check that the fence is square. I'm going to check for square with the fence in the front of the table in a few spots along the track, as well as check in both fence positions. I'm also going to check that the fence is square with the miter slot. Move the fence until it reaches the miter slot and check to see if the front of the fence or back of the fence overlaps. If any part of the fence overlaps the slot first, the fence needs adjusted. As you can see here with this fence, the back of the fence is flush with the slot before the front of the fence, therefore an adjustment is needed. As an additional check, I use a speed square. Place the speed square in the miter slot and move the fence over until it's tight against the square, and lock the fence. Slide the square across the table and check for any gaps. Also check that the square slides consistently across without any areas being tighter or looser, as that would indicate an adjustment is needed. There is a noticeable gap in the front and the square has quite a bit of play. To adjust the fence, just use a 4mm Allen wrench to loosen the locator pins on the fence rails on the front or back. I only loosen the front or the back, not both, depending on which part of the fence is out of alignment. In this case, I loosen the front, adjust the square, and tighten it back down. I check again for square and confirm the speed square slides through the track smoothly with the same effort, whereas before it was tight in the back of the fence and too much play in the front. Next, check that the fence is 90 degrees with the table. This is square all the way through and only one small adjustment was needed. Check that the rip scale indicator is set up correctly. That can easily be adjusted by these two screws and moving the guide. Unlock the rail lock lever. Set the blade at 0 and move the fence in until it touches the blade. Lock the rail lock lever and ensure the rip scale indicator reads 0. If not, loosen the screws and adjust accordingly. I'm going to do a test cut to confirm. I'm going to cut this piece at 2 inches. Move the fence to 2 inches and lock it down. Raise the blade so it's about 1/8 inch higher than the top of the workpiece. Put on your PPE before making your cut. Measure to ensure it's 2 inches. This was right on the money. Don't forget to subtract 2 inches from the rip scale reading when using the narrowing ripping fence. The miter gauge is poor quality, along with the miter slot having a lot of slop, which is arguably the biggest negative feedback. To correct this, use one layer of blue painter's tape to wrap around the sides. As you see now, there is 0 play. To adjust the miter gauge, take a piece of stock cut at 90 degrees and put it flush against the fence and the miter gauge. If needed, adjust the arrow with the Phillips screwdriver to 90 degrees. I would recommend upgrading the miter gauge, and you can see the difference as this one has 0 play, is very accurate, and will save time. I'll include the link to this nice precision miter gauge upgrade in the description. The miter slot is 7/16 inch deep 3/4 inch wide, and is a T miter slot that can also accept a U miter gauge. One last item I recommend is a digital angle finder. It's a must-have tool for a table saw to quickly and accurately adjust angles when cutting that I will also provide a link to.
This is a high quality saw that I would recommend. It only needed minor adjustments. It's a powerful 15 amp saw that can handle large or small projects and is easy to move with a quick setup and teardown. I really appreciate you watching. If you like this video, I have another one queued up for you. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like, comment, share, and hit that notification bell so you can get notified when I release new videos.